And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Nicole Seay, who during her near-death experience visited Dante's Inferno, which we're going to learn about and more. Nicole, thanks for joining me and welcome.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you so much for having me. I've listened to a lot of your videos and I really like your content.
Thank you very much, Nicole, and we are happy to have you. So tell us a little bit about your background and then what happened.
So, growing up, I had a challenging childhood. There was a lot of trauma that happened, and that kind of followed me through the years. And I had an event that happened when I was 14 that was extremely traumatic for me, and I believed that it was my fault that it happened, and so that kind of sent me on a collision course of self-destructive behavior. Um, and at that point, that was when my urge to take my life started. I really have struggled with that a lot throughout the years. And I was just always so depressed. And but then, and then when I became an adult, I still kind of was falling into the same relationships with people who weren't very nice to me. And, also I felt maybe that was the love that I deserved because, I didn't really think very high of myself. And that also contributed to my mental health issues and just chronically trying to leave the earth. I just wanted the pain to go away. The emotional pain was just it was just really, really hard to deal with. And so when I was 28 years old, this was in 2011, I had just gotten out of another abusive relationship, and I was just so depressed. And I decided to take my life again. With this attempt, I ended up taking more than I've taken previously, and I followed that with, alcohol. And the last thing I remember was passing out on my couch. And then I went straight into my hellish experience. Um, I it it looks like Dante's Inferno to me. And for people who don't really know what that is, it's basically a depiction of hell with 9 circles of hell. And but the typical depiction is shown as a funnel going downward. However, I saw it as a mountain, and um, and there was fire and lava, and it was just I I can't really even articulate how like scary it was to be there. And so the level I feel like I was in was the first level, which was limbo. But after the limbo stage, um, I still had to climb all the way up to get to the level 2. And level 2 was where I say the gates of hell was. And so I'm having to climb up this really steep hill or mountain. And as I'm doing it, I'm kind of doing like sometimes like I'm doing an army crawl. Sometimes I'm, stepping on, there was people embedded into the ground. Some were waist up and some were just their heads. And as I'm climbing, I'm stepping on their skulls and like crushing them and hearing them wail in pain. And and the ones that had arms, they were trying to pull me down. And yeah, and so then I ended up getting to the level 2. And so then there were gates there, which kind of looked like your typical iron gates where you can see through it. Um, but on each side was, I call them the gatekeepers. But they kind of were demonic figures. They were really, really tall. They were very ominous. They were very scary. And so, but I could look through the gates and I could see the other levels. And on each level, like the punishment was getting worse and worse for these people. I called them the tortured souls. On the top, there was I called him the witch doctor, but he probably was more like the devil. But I'm still kind of uncovering why I keep calling him the witch doctor. But he kind of was troll like, wearing a mask and like had like a staff with like someone's head or skull on it. Um and and so when I got to the gates, the gatekeepers were like, "No, you're not ready." And they would push me all the way back down, like really far down. And so I kept doing that climbing and then getting pushed down and climbing and getting pushed down over and over and over. It was almost like I feel like I was there for like eternity. And I was starting to get really upset because I wanted to get into hell, like because that was where I thought I deserved to be, given what, you know, struggles that I was dealing with. And, I did start using substances to deal with the emotional pain from my childhood and in my adolescence. And the fact that I was trying to hurt myself all the time, that's where um, yeah, I felt like I deserved to be in hell. And so, yeah, they just kept saying, "You're not ready." So as I climbed this mountain over and over and I'm stepping on these people, I really think now that those people were trying to save me from going up the mountain. And it kind of reminded me of the scene in the movie What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams when he traveled to the underworld and to save his wife. And yeah, and so seeing that movie, like I was like, oh my God, that's what I saw. And I do want to say, like, before my experience, I didn't know what Dante's Inferno was. I remember seeing the painting probably in high school, but I had no idea. And after my experience, I, started, trying to figure out what I saw, and then I found Dante's Inferno. So after so many times, if it a million times, I somehow like transitioned into a different scene, and I don't really remember exactly how I got there, but the next scene I went into was, I believe, was maybe a past life. And I've done a quantum healing hypnosis session, and I'm pretty sure that that was a past life where I wasn't able to escape my boyfriend or husband's violence against me. And then there was a couple other scenes I'm still I'm still unpacking those. Those are a little vague, but now that I'm talking about my experience more, I'm starting to connect dots that I didn't think of until recently, and some new awarenesses that are coming, and so then the last scene was where I ended up in I call it the wishing well. Um, and I'm all the way down at the bottom of this well, and it's like really, really tall. Um, and but I could see three silhouettes looking over the wishing well, looking down into where I was. And behind them, I did see the light. I saw like the etheric light, and but I really was not in that scene for very long. And uh, and the three silhouettes, I knew for sure that the silhouette on the left was a female, and that she was my aunt, Simone, who had taken her life in 2008. And she kind of became like, kind of, I guess, maybe a guardian angel of sorts. Uh, and, but I didn't know who the other two silhouettes were. All I knew was that they were male. So I'm in the bottom of the well, and it was almost the same kind of feeling of trying to climb out, but not being able to. And I kept getting pushed down or falling down. And then after that, the next thing I remember is, I think at this point I wasn't fully back into my body, but I felt like my awareness was like right here. And and so after this attempt that I made, um, my mom knew I was struggling, and she wasn't living near me anymore. And I didn't really realize how much I needed her until she wasn't, you know, within driving distance. And so, and she knew I was dealing with the depression and the just dealing with the aftermath of that abusive relationship. And so she ended up sending, it was a few days before my birthday, and my 28th birthday. And so to cheer me up, she sent flowers to my work. And when she didn't hear from me to say thank you or anything, she had that mother's intuition. Given my patterns, since, for 14 years, I was really wanting to leave this world. Um, and and so she ended up calling my work, and they were like, yeah, she no called, no showed. And so that's when she knew something was wrong. And so she called the police to come do a welfare check on me. and And this is where I'm out of my body. I could hear the conversation that the officer was having with my mom. And I heard him say, well, her car's here. It doesn't look like there was forced entry. That's the extent of, their job, to just check, on the welfare, not necessarily like enter someone's, house or apartment. But I could tell that he was picking up on the terror of my mom's voice, and he had the intuition or wherewithal to um, go and drive to the property manager to get my key. And so they come in, and And the officer said that I was completely white. I wasn't breathing. And his words were, I thought you were a goner. And the reason I know this is after this experience, after 2 weeks coming out of it, I was in a lot of, I had a lot of fog, and I just kind of wanted him to, tell me exactly how he found me. And, and so, yeah, I ended up talking to him on the phone. Uh, he said that they found me on the floor. But when they entered my apartment, the main officer, um, started like yelling at me and like trying to wake me up and like shake my shoulders. And he said it was the craziest thing that all of a sudden I turned my head, opened my eyes, and took a breath. And I could tell that really freaked him out because even 2 weeks later, I could tell in his voice that it really shook him. And, you know, I I really, like when you think of, first responders, you think that they're kind of like used to finding, people dead or, horrific things, but they're people, and I think it's still traumatic, even if they do see it all the time, it's still a traumatic uh event for them. And so while they were waiting for the paramedics, I could hear them conversing with each other. And I had a cat at the time, and I made sure that he had a lot of food and water because I wasn't sure how long it was going to take for someone to find me. And, and, and I remember the other officer saying, well, I gave her cat more food and water, just in case. And I that just the level of care that these officers gave me was just, I don't know, they went above and beyond, I feel like, for me. And so after he said that I opened my eyes, I really wasn't in my body yet. I was still, it was like my consciousness was right here. I still do not know what these officers look like. I do know one of their names. Just recently, I tried to find him, but I haven't been able to find him. And so the paramedics came and they took me to the hospital, and um, and I was really out of it for a long time. And at this point, my mom had flown to California to deal with what happened. And I remember telling her about that I saw hell, I saw fire and lava and demons and gatekeepers and witch doctor, and I could tell that kind of like freaked her out. And I was like, okay, like I can't talk about this because, I don't want to be labeled as crazy. And I also was trying to downplay it. I was like, you took a lot of medication, you maybe this was a hallucination, maybe, I didn't have any explanation about how it happened or what I saw. So I also shut it down. But it's stayed with me, like, uh, and now it's 14 years later since my NDE. And I've noticed that like there's been a like pattern now, and it's just recently that I'm like, okay, like the most traumatic thing that happened to me was at 14 years old, and then 14 years later was my NDE, and now 14 years later I'm now like talking about my NDE. So it's kind of strange. But yeah, and so then I never said it out loud ever again until a few months ago. And I've been asking myself, like, why is this coming up now? Like, why, because it was just so long ago. And I really do feel like, now that I'm in a really good, healthy mental state now, is that I've now am able to process what happened, and I can't even explain to you the freedom that speaking it out loud has uh, been gifted to me. I yeah, I if you would have told me last year that I would be like talking about my experience on the internet, I would have said you're crazy because like this was something I never wanted out in the public. Um, and but now I'm seeing the benefits of telling my story. So in May, I was hanging out with some friends, and one of them said, I just listened to this really good podcast. It was an episode of a woman who had a near death experience. And I just very casually said, "Oh, I had one of those." And the friend was like, "What? You did? Like, would you tell me about it?" And I was like, "Okay." And I just told it. And it was just like, I felt like a million pounds was lifted off my chest. And then on the way home, I started listening to that podcast, and I was in tears because I resonated so much with her story. And yeah, and so then the the next few days I was just like just constantly consuming any because she's been on a lot of podcasts. And then I came across where she was saying that she found support, a community of people who, have also had near death experiences or spiritually transformative experiences. And she mentioned the organization IANS, which is the International Association for Near Death Studies. And I was like, "Oh, what's that about?" And so I Googled it, and I just kind of was looking on there. And then I found out that they have free sharing groups. And so I signed up to do one of those. And I, was still very nervous about talking about it. But I also felt very safe. Um, and when I just said really briefly, like, I went to hell, and I still don't understand it. And then the facilitator was like, "We have actually a distressing NDE group for people who've had hellish experiences, or where they find themselves in the void and they're isolated and there's no one around, and like there's no afterlife or whatever." And so I ended up going to that group, and I just briefly said again, like, I've listened to so many people's NDEs, and I've read so many books, but they're all about the positive ones. And I said, I just didn't have that experience. Mine was very unpleasant. And when I said that, I just saw people's heads like, nod. And I was like, oh, like, I did not realize how much I needed that validation. And it still kind of chokes me up to think about it was just that sigh of relief that I found like people that understand me, and like that I am not crazy. I know what I saw. I've heard people say like it was more real than real, and that was, yeah, like I was there, and so as I've been talking about it and going to other groups, it's been easier telling my story. I still do get nervous. I mean, I'm nervous right now. You're one of my first few podcasts, but I just keep saying yes to opportunities because I know that it will lead to something, that maybe I need to hear or think about or whatever. But yeah, and so then uh, that facilitator, he asked me, if I would tell him my story, from start to finish, and I said okay. And so I told him, and then he was like, I want to invite you to be on the Distressing NDE panel at the conference, which was in Chicago at the end of August of 2025. And I was like, what? Really? Like, that's just insane. Like, you guys want to hear my story? I don't know. Like, it was just like, I didn't feel like my story had any value and that people would hear it. And of course, I was just like, I don't know if I could do this. Like, I just came out of the NDE closet. Like, this is very new to me. And obviously, like, public speaking is challenging for a lot of people. But I told him, I said, let me think about it. I didn't want to say no right away, but I said, let me talk to some people and bounced it off of them. And so I started telling people about it. And it was just a crazy experience because I was so excited to tell people, like my friends. I'm like, hey, like I had an NDE and now I'm being asked to be on this panel. And I'm like, isn't this wild? Like, you can't make this up. Like, and I just was so excited, which was super foreign feeling, and so I said, yeah, I'm gonna do it. And I did it, and it was the most amazing experience of my life. And I'm just so grateful that I said yes to something scary, and it was just like I met so many people. Like I've been reading books, and so a lot of the authors of these books were actually there, and I was like fangirling, like, hey, can you autograph my book? Or and of course, like, Dr. Raymond Moody was there, and this was his golden anniversary of his seminal book, Life After Life. And, he was the one that coined near death experience 50 years ago. And so I was like, okay, like all these synchronicities started happening. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. Like, it just felt like things were lining up perfectly. And I've met so many amazing people. I feel like I've made friends, lifelong friends. I feel like I've met my tribe, and we just already have this understanding that we do know that there's life after death, and we can just go, like, just have that um that I guess sense of camaraderie. So, yeah, and then so after the conference, I'm kind of like, okay, now what? Like, I just feel like doors have been like blown wide open. And um and I've been asked to, share my story a few times. So because I've been talking so much about my experience, I've been getting a lot of epiphanies and light bulbs, and like I said, the synchronicities have been mind-blowing. But something that I totally had a perspective shift was that I saw hell, but I wasn't in hell. I saw through the gates, and that was the start of hell. But they wouldn't let me in. And that whole thing just totally shifted my the way I told that story is like I thought I was a bad person and that's where I deserved to be. But no, they wouldn't let me in. And so that has really, really changed my outlook of this. And I do want to say that after my experience, I still struggled a lot with my mental health. And I would be lying if I told you that I didn't try to hurt myself again. But I've I'm 5 years out of not doing that because obviously I keep surviving my attempts, and now I know why is because I'm still supposed to be here. I'm still supposed to talk to people and tell them that they're not alone. Like, and I know there's a lot of people out there who've had, distressing NDEs, but there isn't a lot of people talking about it because just like with me, like I didn't want people to know that I went to hell, that I was a bad person and all of that. So, if anything, I just want to give just encouragement to people that it's okay to talk about it. And um, and at the conference, when I was sharing my story, people were in tears, and people kept coming up to me and they're like, "Thank you for sharing. I needed to hear what you had to say. I can relate to what you went through." And people were coming up to me, they're like, "I was so moved by what you said." And that's kind of my new like purpose, I guess, is that I just want to be a safe place for people. I know I'm pretty new to this whole arena, but I do think it's kind of cool. Like, so at the conference, I bought a shirt. It says, "Have you died?" And I wear it all the time, and it's a really good like conversation starter. But it's just been kind of crazy because like I've had people come up to me and like they're like, "Oh yeah, my dad had an NDE." Or I had this other friend, he's like, "My daughter was unconscious for 6 minutes after childbirth, but she doesn't have any memory and she's like kind of having to relearn how to walk and all that." And I was like, "Yeah, like if she remembers having an NDE, like I'm totally open to talking to her." Um I went camping with a bunch of people 2 weeks ago and I wore that shirt. And I had 2 women come up to me and tell me that they had NDEs. And I pointed them towards IANS, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm the safe place for people now." Like, it's just kind of this new, like, sense of purpose, and it's I do feel like now that I'm have a different view of what I saw. It was like, I put myself in hell. That was the my human construct of what I thought hell was. Like, because I'm not very religious, but I mean, everyone knows about heaven and hell. And yeah, that was my own personal hell that I put myself in. And I just want to tell people that um you don't need to go to hell. Like, and I actually did not have a life review. But my new, like, kinda motto now is, like, I do a life review every day. Like, I am like, "Hey, like, you know, were you loving and kind to people today?" And if I wasn't, I'm like, "Uh-oh, like, I need to course correct and, apologize or whatnot." And so, yeah, I'm trying to do my there's another woman who, was on the panel with me, and I love when she says this. She says, "Skip the trip. Like, you don't have to go to, hell." And I think I was shown this hellish landscape almost as like a warning of like you need to kind of clean up your act. I am 5 years sober, and recovery has become such a big part of my life, and I am just so grateful that I've survived all my attempts to get me to this point. If, like I said earlier, if you would have told me a year ago that I would, have been talking about the hardest thing that I never even wanted to bring out into the light, I would have said you're crazy. And another thing that I've realized, um, is going back to the wishing well. I now think that those two male silhouettes were those police officers. And I know that's kind of weird because they're alive and my aunt was dead, but I think I had one foot in that realm and I had one foot in to, the 3D. Um and I'm thinking they were my spirit or they were my guardian angels, I feel like, and they saved my life. But I also feel like my aunt saved my life too, because I feel like she was pushing me back down, saying that I wasn't ready for, to cross over. And, I did see the bright light behind them. And I know if I went to the light, I wouldn't be here. Um, but I still have a mission.
Nicole, thank you for sharing your experience with us. Since you're in DE, have you noticed that you have any new abilities that could be considered psychic like?
I feel like my intuition is really spot on 99% of the time. Like, I feel it and I can pick it up. But as far as like psychic abilities, I don't think so. I don't like have telepathy or anything like that, but just more of that like gut instinct. And I have been having so many experiences where that gut instinct comes true, and that is the validation that, oh, okay, I can pick up on things, and trusting my intuition now. And I mean, I've been wrong sometimes, but uh most of the time I'm pretty spot on.
Have the memories of the experience faded over time?
No, they're seared into my brain. I there are parts that are still coming to me. Like said, there was a couple other scenes in between the hellish part and the tunnel or the wishing well part, um, that I'm still kind of fuzzy on. And I do want to do some more like, um, past life regression therapy, to but also maybe I'm not meant to know what those were. Maybe I don't need to, um, figure out that part.
Do you feel certain that consciousness goes on after death?
Oh yeah, 1000%. Yeah, like, and so this is kind of that I thought about the other day was in my experience, I still felt like I was in a body, but I know that like our consciousness doesn't need to be in a body. Um yeah, so 1000% I do believe that, you know, uh consciousness goes on and we're just in I've heard people say like we are just living a temporary experience and it takes a lot for a soul to come to earth, like, and it's life isn't supposed to be so hard, but like for me, I'm now grateful. Now that I'm on the other side of all of this, I'm grateful for all my traumas because I now have empathy for people who have had the same or similar and um so when I think about like that I chose to come down here, I chose to have these things happen to me, but the ultimate lesson I feel like is to help someone else. That's like, yeah, and um I'm a social worker now, and I work with people who've had, you know, traumas and substance abuse issues. I've dealt with men who are transitioning out of prison, like a reentry program. And I'm finding my purpose through helping others.
After watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open to that?
I am. Uh, and like I've said, this is a very new experience for me. It's only been like 5 or 6 months. So I don't have like books or websites like other people have, but we could pop my email down in the description. Um, or you can find me on Facebook. Um, and yeah, I would love for, if people have questions to reach out to me because I kind of like telling my story now.
Do you want to share your email address with us now?
Sure. So it's my first name, Nicole .Seay 45 at iCloud.com. So it's my first name dot my last name 45 at iCloud.
Nicole, before we finish up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
Yeah, just try to live in the moment. That's all we have is right now. Um, like you don't need to dwell on the past. You don't need to worry about the future. All we have is right now. We have 24 hours in a day. And so try to make the most use out of those 24 hours. And what's really helped me is um, gratitude and just try to be loving and kind to other people because we're here for a reason and um, life is good.
Nicole, thank you for your message and thank you for being my guest.
Thanks, Jeff. Have a good day.
You too. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.